Is this the week that finally brings closure for Kate and Gerry McCann as 26 miles of scrubland near Praia da Luz, where Madeleine went missing in 2007, are finally searched?
We'll be speaking to Martin Evans, our crime editor, who's covered the story since the night Madeleine disappeared in 2007.
Brueckner was a convicted paedophile. He was a known sex offender and he was living in the area at the time. It seems extraordinary to me now that the police authorities, be it in Portugal, in Germany or in the UK, hadn't managed to sort of, tie that together.
Gordon, when I came in this morning, I knew we were going to do an episode on Madeleine McCann's disappearance, and I was discussing it with my oldest child, who's 16. And she is familiar, of course, with the case because of everything she's seen on social media about it. But it is quite bizarre to think that she was not around, she wasn't alive. She was born in 2008, so a year after Madeleine went missing. It's quite hard to explain to her just how significant this was at the time it happened. You and I both working on newspapers, everybody in journalism at that period, regardless of their specialty, was drafted onto this story, basically.
Yeah, I can't think of another story other than a war where the British media, maybe the world's media, has descended on a foreign country in such great numbers for such a long time. People were there for months and months and months without stop.
No, and also without much information coming forward. And we're going to get into just how bungled that initial police investigation by the Portuguese was. But should we just be reminded of that evening on May the 3rd, 2007, when it was discovered that Madeleine was missing from their hotel room?
We're just hearing that a search is underway for a 3-year-old British girl who's gone missing in the Algarve area of Portugal, and she went missing last night. Hundreds of people have been searching for the girl, and that search continuing this morning. So we will try to get as much on that as for you as soon as we can. That missing girl in Lutz, and we will bring it to you as soon as we get further detail. Let's just bring you some more detail on the breaking news that we brought you a short while ago. A 3-year-old British girl has gone missing while on a family holiday in Portugal. It's been confirmed by the Foreign Office. Some more detail on this for you now. The Portuguese police are investigating the disappearance from a holiday complex in Praia da Luz in the western Algarve. I think we've got a map we can show you there. The Foreign Office spokesman has said that he understood the girl's parents had gone to have dinner once their children were asleep last night, but returned to check on them only to find that the little girl had gone missing. And they reported the little girl's disappearance straight away, and they are being given consular assistance in Portugal, but no word on to where this little girl has gone, and considerable efforts being made indeed to try to track down at extraordinary difficult time for her parents. But it would appear that she went missing after the parents had gone to have supper, went back to check that she was okay, check on the children were okay, and the 3-year-old had gone missing. As soon as we get any further detail on that, we'll bring it to you.
Well, it became one of the biggest, if not the biggest, missing persons case in history, certainly in our country's history. And it became infamous partly because of the debate around whether Madeleine should have been left by her parents, Kate and Gerry, who were 2 doctors from Leicestershire. Their twins, Sean and Amelie, who were aged 2, were also left in the room while they and their friends had a meal in the resort, sort of just out of sight of where their children had been left in that room.
Yes, and the friends and the McCanns became known as the Tapas 7, but they were regularly checking on the children. All of them were downstairs dining while their children were in their rooms. And there was this sort of clash of cultures, wasn't there? Because the Portuguese seemed to be taking a position on the McCanns that seemed unfavourable. You then have Gerry and Kate clearly distraught at the time, trying to appeal to the public to help find this child. And the public didn't have as much sympathy with them because of the manner in which they'd left Madeleine than they might have had in different circumstances, which made the whole thing very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think particularly with it being in Portugal, that clash of cultures that you referred to, I think the Portuguese found it baffling that people might leave their children unattended. Obviously, a lot of people here would have sympathised with that. But certainly in Portugal, it's just not really something that is done, I don't think. So immediately the police became suspicious just because of that. And very quickly they seem to have made their minds up, didn't they, that the McCanns must have been guilty somehow, and started looking for evidence to effectively prove their guilt rather than looking for evidence of what had actually happened.
Then the McCanns are staying in Praia da Luz because they obviously want to be involved in the search for their missing daughter. And that September, so just a few months after Madeleine went missing, we have that moment where they become suspects or arguidos, the only time that phrase would ever be used, I think, in British headlines. And it's easy to forget now that they remained suspects, Gordon, for almost a year afterwards.
Yeah, July 2008, I think, when they were finally it was announced they weren't suspects anymore, and that is an awfully long time in the investigation for the police to be looking the wrong way, effectively, and not looking for evidence of anybody else's involvement, not looking hard enough.
You also have this unique personality clash. We talk about culture clash. There's then this personality clash, isn't there, with the head of the Portuguese police investigating the crime, a man called Goncalo Amaral. I mean, he goes on to write a book basically pointing the finger of suspicion and blame at the McCanns, and there's subsequent legal and libel cases and all the rest of it. But that does rather divert attention. You've then got, this all coincides, doesn't it, with the rise of smartphones and social media, a huge amount of conspiracy theories online, which on reflection must have been so deeply hurtful to the McCanns as they are struggling to come to terms with the disappearance of their daughter and seemingly the complete inability of either the Portuguese police or, by the way, Scotland Yard to find her. Let's just quickly go through a sort of potted history of then what happens. So we have in 2012, Scotland Yard suggesting she might still be alive. Do you remember that artist impression of Madeleine as a 9-year-old? That gets released. We then, a year later in 2013, have Scotland Yard launching that Operation Grange. That then identifies 38 people who they say are of interest, 12 of them British. The Portuguese then reopen the investigation. The following year, we've got sniffer dog searches carried out in nearby Scrubland. Again, 11 people are questioned. We then get in 2017 to the 10-year anniversary, where the McCanns once again reflect on a decade of loss and heartbreak.
No parent's going to give up on their child unless they know for certain their child's dead, and that we just don't have any evidence. So
my
you've
hope
got to...
of Madeleine being out there is no less than it was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, and then in 2020, it seemed like there'd been a breakthrough. Police said that a 43-year-old German prisoner, later named, as we know, as Christian Brueckner, had been identified as a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance, but it came at a cost because the German police also revealed that they believed Madeleine was dead.
In connection with the disappearance of Madeleine Beth McCann on the 3rd of June 2007 in Praia da Luz, the public prosecution office has charged a suspect with murder. We assume that the girl is dead.
Then we have 2 years later Brueckner being identified as a suspect or arguido by the Portuguese police.
There is a lot of circumstantial evidence, it would appear, linking Brueckner to Madeleine's disappearance. At the time, he was living in a rundown property on the outskirts of the coastal town. A mobile phone registered in his name was traced close to the McCann's accommodation on the night she went missing. Then in October 2024, Brueckner was cleared at a German trial for 2 sexual assaults and 3 rapes committed in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. But the prosecutors are considering appealing the verdict. He's currently serving a 7-year prison sentence for raping a 72-year-old in Praia da Luz in 2005.
So that's significant because he was clearly there at the time of the disappearance, and he is linked to another crime in the very area where Madeleine went missing. We then have the situation in 2023 where a dam near to Praia da Luz, it's about 30 miles away, and it's somewhere where Brueckner used to hang out between 2000 and 2017. That gets searched, and it's significant because Brueckner, it's discovered, has posed for selfies there, some quite strange selfies, one of them naked where he's superimposed a balaclava, a mask, onto his face. The Sun newspaper gets involved in this particular sort of part of the story, and along with Channel 4 Dispatches, they produce a documentary where they try and drill into some of the so-called unseen evidence that the German prosecutors have found. One of the themes of the recent developments in this case, Gordon, has been the secrecy of the German prosecutors. They seem to know something, but they don't really tell the public what it is that they are linking Brueckner to the crime. What is it specifically that you have seen that has convinced you that Brueckner may be guilty of this? And then in this documentary, there's a load of revelations, but basically it's as well as his link to the dam, which has been searched. A warehouse that he bought a year after Madeleine disappears emerges in Germany. It's then been searched by police. There's some very suspicious items found there. For instance, there's a Jaguar car belonging to Brueckner, and in the boot there's a load of chemical substances, and the police haven't confirmed what they actually found. We then have a cache of children's toys. They find a load of other chemicals. They find actual guns. They find toy guns. They find swimming costumes belonging to young girls. And crucially, they send in a sniffer dog, and a sniffer dog discovers remains on the site that are actually revealed to be Brueckner's dog, Brueckner's dead dog, but buried alongside this animal are a wallet, 6 USB sticks, and 2 memory cards, and a laptop is taken away. But to this day, the German authorities still haven't told us what they found in this technology.
If anything. So then we have news of this latest search of Atalaya, roughly a 10-minute drive from Praia da Luz, where Brueckner was living at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. He's never been charged over Madeleine's disappearance. He denies any involvement, and as we said earlier, he's told a German reporter that he would flee to a country without an extradition treaty with Germany and go into hiding if he's released, and as we said, that he plans to celebrate with steak and beer.
So weird to do that interview. I mean, it's in the German. It's running now on the German broadcaster RTL. Clearly, he must have, I don't know, exchanged letters or something, or had a conversation with a reporter from behind bars. But he's continuing to protest his innocence, and that must be stressed. However, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this search might play out. Martin Evans, the Telegraph's crime editor, joins us now. Welcome back to the Daily Tea, Martin.
Thank you.
This is a case that you have covered really from the very beginning. So what's your reaction now to this new search? Where exactly are they searching after all these years, 18 years?
Yeah, so the German police have asked the Portuguese authorities to assist in a search of an area which is to the east of Praia da Luz, between that resort and the resort of Lagos, which is a few miles down the coast. And what we know is that the prime suspect in the case, Christian Brueckner, a German national, was living in a sort of a ramshackle cottage in that area in 2007 when Madeleine disappeared.
What exactly is this area that they're searching? It's a big area, isn't it? And they've only got 3 days to do it.
That's right.
Why in particular are they looking in the area that they are? And can you just describe a little bit about what that area is like? You know that area very well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that creates one of the difficulties that they'll encounter. It's a sort of area of sort of scrubland, basically. There are dwellings in the area between Praia da Luz and Lagos, but it's pretty remote. It's very barren. You have the odd cottage dotted around, sort of old farm buildings and things. Praia da Luz was originally a fishing port, a fishing village, and Lagos is a slightly bigger port, but in between them it was pretty uninhabited. So it's mainly scrubland, very dry, barren landscape with the odd dwelling dotted around. And we know that Brueckner had spent time living in that area.
But are the areas that they're searching, do we think this is intelligence-led, or is it just sort of, let's look for places where you might hide a body? If we're talking about
fear it's possibly the latter, and the reason I say that is because they've only given themselves 3 days to search an area which I understand is 26 miles in length. If they were saying to us, we are searching in an area of 600 square meters, I think that would lead us to think that they'd got some intelligence and they knew where they were looking. This feels a bit more speculative, but they haven't said a great deal about it. It may be that they've got some evidence, some intelligence that's pointing to a specific location within that area. We just don't know.
And what about the searches that have already taken place? Because there was some soil samples taken from that reservoir or dam
That's right.
that Brueckner used to hang out at, which was quite quite close to Praia da Luz.
Well, I mean, since 2008, really, when the Portuguese police closed the original investigation, there was a period where nothing was done. And then Scotland Yard launched Operation Grange in 2013, which was a sort of back to basics re-investigation of the case. And following that, there were a number of searches that took place in and around Praia da Luz. And then 2 years ago, the German police focused on, as you say, this dam, which was an area where Brueckner used to spend a lot of time. But all of these searches have so far been fruitless. As far as we're aware, they've never uncovered, anything even remotely helpful to the investigation.
Can I just clarify something? When they're looking, they are obviously looking for remains. I mean, any evidence now, looking for any kind of other forensic evidence aside from remains. I mean, that time has passed, hasn't it, Martin?
You would think so. I mean, forensic science is incredibly sophisticated, and we know from other cases that tiny fragments of evidence can prove absolutely crucial in getting justice. But it's hard to think that what they might find 18 years on in a pretty vast area, to be fair, other than remains, that's going to help them with the investigation. At this stage, we don't know exactly what this group will be doing on the ground, but we know from the past they've used things like cadaver dogs. They've used technology, it's sort of sonar equipment which tests for where the ground may have been disturbed. So there are techniques and technologies available to them, which I'm sure they'll be using everything at their disposal.
This whole race against time, it's been 18 years, and yet we're now in this situation where there's a desperate scramble in 3 days. But just explain that in the context of where Brueckner is right now and what's going to happen to him.
Brueckner's currently serving a 7-year sentence for a horrific rape of an elderly American tourist not far from Praia da Luz, which occurred in 2005, 2 years before Madeleine disappeared. He's coming to the end of that sentence. He's due for release in September. Now, in October last year, he faced a number of other serious charges, sex offences and other charges, but he was actually cleared by a German court. Now, one of the aspects of German justice means that the prosecution can actually appeal against that verdict, and I understand that is currently being considered. So if that takes place, his release might be delayed, so that might give the investigators involved in the Madeleine case more time. But it's certainly possible that he could be released in September, and I think that's one of the things that the German police are concerned about. And going back to the time frame and the irony, of course, if we think back to 2007, in the early hours and days of Madeleine's disappearance, what investigators call the sort of the golden hours, the Portuguese police really failed to do the basics, and as a result, so much potential crucial evidence was lost. And because of that, all of the investigative opportunities that might have been available to the Scotland Yard team and the German police has gone.
Can you just remind us, what have the Germans said? What do we know about what the Germans know about Brueckner? There's been talk of them having evidence that she's dead, hasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite cryptic. So they've said in quite stark terms that they have got evidence which leads them to believe that he killed Madeleine, but they have never really divulged what that evidence is. We think it's possibly mobile phone triangulation evidence which puts him at the sort of in the area at the time. But of course, we know he was living in the area at the time, so one would assume there is more than just the fact that he was in the area. But they've been very cagey about releasing any further information. What we do know, though, is that Scotland Yard, the Operation Grange team, who were looking at this from 2013 onwards, when in 2020 the Germans named Brueckner as the prime suspect, Scotland Yard were very supportive of that statement, and so from that I assume that Scotland Yard are aware of further evidence which hasn't been made public, which strongly suggests that Brueckner is responsible.
Because there'd be a lot of people who followed this case who will be thinking, well, if they've got evidence that she's dead, or if, as you say, they've got evidence that he killed her, why haven't they charged him? Are there differences between their legal system and our legal system? Would he have been charged in this country, do you think, by now?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. Very different judicial systems. If a British police officer had said what the German police have said, i.e. we have got very strong evidence to suggest he killed her, I think he would have been charged.
Martin, we were working at Express newspapers together back in the day that Madeleine disappeared, and then you were on the scene weeks afterwards and covered it extensively. Was Brueckner's name ever in the frame in that first few years? When did we first hear his name associated with this case?
Well, the first time I heard his name associated with the case was in 2020 when he was named by German prosecutors. I mean, there were names back in 2007 and 8. It seems extraordinary now looking back because, I mean, you know, literally the world's press were in Praia da Luz in 2007 or 2008, and every possible lead was being explored. Brueckner was a convicted paedophile. He was a known sex offender, and he was living in the area at the time.
Yeah.
It seems extraordinary to me now that the police authorities, be it in Portugal, in Germany, or in the UK, hadn't managed to sort of, you know, tie that together. But certainly, he was not a name. It was not a name that I was aware of back in 2007-8.
And there was a recent Channel 4 Dispatches documentary. I think they'd worked together with some journalists at The Sun, painting a picture of Brueckner that was really quite disturbing. Allegedly sharing images of children, discussing children. And in one of those messages, Brueckner tells one of these associates that he, quotes, wanted to capture something small and use it for days. He had premises that were searched where it was revealed he had young girls' swimming costumes. And also we've had these reports of Brueckner apparently confessing. I think we've had one report of him confessing to a fellow inmate in prison, but again, a degree of question marks over the reliability of that. And then he's also been linked to attending a music festival in the Algarve in the months after Madeleine's disappearance, where the friend that he went to this event with claims that he told him that Madeleine, quotes, did not scream. Again, there's question marks over its veracity, but 2 appearances of him having confessed to Madeleine's abduction.
I think with all sort of, you know, prison confessions to other inmates, credibility is sometimes an issue. So it's entirely possible that whether or not these searches are successful prior to his expected release later this year, there may be charges. I've got to be honest, the fact that the scale of the searches is so vast, you know, 21 miles, I think, an area, a huge area, and the fact that they've only given themselves 3 days to do it, if they were saying we have got an area of 500 square metres and we're going to spend 3 days looking at it, I'd be more hopeful.
The other thing is about the race against time, of course, is that the authorities know Brueckner well, and the fear is that he'll be released from prison after serving the sentence for the rape of the elderly lady and then just disappear into the ether. That's his modus operandi. They can't trace
Yeah.
him after that, which strikes me as unbelievable. If you're Kate and Jerry,
Yeah.
what are you thinking right now? You know, that they are this close, but not close enough, and that in a matter of weeks, the person who is suspected of abducting and killing your daughter could just disappear into the night.
Yeah, I mean, it does strike me as a bit odd, that, because if that was in the UK and a convicted sex offender was released from prison having served his sentence, he would not be able to disappear into the ether. You are monitored by probation, and you're very, very closely scrutinised. So I find it a bit odd, this suggestion that once he's released from this 7-year sentence for a violent rape, he will just be able to disappear without trace.
Why do you think the world, not just Britain, the world has remained so gripped by this case for at the time and even 18 years on? Children going missing is not, sadly, is not an entirely unusual occurrence. Why did this become such an enormous story, and why are people still so interested, do you think?
I think it's the circumstances of her disappearance which just gripped the nation. I mean, these were two doctors, middle-class, well-educated people. They're on a holiday resort which is familiar to many British holiday makers, the Algarve. Hundreds of thousands of Brits go to the Algarve every year. And of course, if we remember the circumstances of what happened, Kate and Jerry were at dinner with friends, and they'd left Madeleine and her two siblings in their holiday apartment. And I think a lot of people took the view that was unforgivable. And everyone had an opinion about the circumstances in which Madeleine went missing. Sadly, a lot of conspiracy theories were born out of that. We know that the Portuguese police, at the time led by Goncalo Amaral, became convinced that Kate and Jerry were responsible. That led to a completely bungled Portuguese police investigation. So I think it kind of snowballed because people had a view of the circumstances in which Madeleine went missing, and then it's of course the mystery. There were various theories, but there was just no concrete evidence as to what had happened. So that allowed people to have lots of different theories. And if we remember back 2007, 2008. It was all anybody was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still something that people are talking about. I was speaking to my daughter about it in the car on the way here to work this morning. And she was sort of questioning why so much expense on solving this case particularly, when, as you say, Gordon, many, many children have gone missing, sadly, and never been found.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the other example of the time of Ben Needham, who was a child who went missing, I believe, again abroad, and the mother campaigned significantly to try and have more resources ploughed into it. Mr. and Mrs. McCann now, they haven't commented on these latest developments. Their twins are grown up, 18 years on. Are we expecting to hear anything from them, Martin?
I mean, they've tended in recent years to say very little. They don't sort of give a running commentary on the investigations, because if they were to start doing that, they would be hounded every day for comment on various things. So they tend not to say very much at all. They still mark the anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. I'm not expecting them to say very much about these searches unless, of course, something significant is recovered.
Worst of both worlds, really. On one hand, wanting a solution, but not particularly wanting to hear that kind of bad news. Martin Evans, thank you very much, as ever, for joining us on the Daily Tea.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's going to be difficult, isn't it, Camilla? It's a huge area that they're searching. But we have had a bit more detail from our reporters on the ground in Portugal, just even while we were talking to Martin there. They're telling us the search is going to focus on 20 plots of land. It'll largely rely on ground-penetrating radar that can scan up to 15 feet below the surface. And local media are reporting that 2 wells in particular are being drained so that the police can send people down to search them. The police apparently did have a tip-off last year that is helping them to narrow down the search area.
But a tip-off last year. I don't know. There seems to be... I feel frustrated on behalf of the McCanns because they must feel so powerless in all this. And I think the whole issue, as we discussed with Martin earlier, has been complicated by the involvement of 3 different police forces, Scotland Yard, the Portuguese and the Germans, all seemingly operating to different systems.
I don't think we can, overstate how much this is going to be sort of difficult for us to understand because we don't really get how the Germans go about these things.